So you may have noticed that we are in a different room. We are not in the garage. We moved inside because it's been very, very hot here, and the garage doesn't have any climate control, so it makes it a ghastly, unpleasant place to film when it's 110, 120 even outside. So we're in here. This is kind of appropriate. The garage is really a lot of the stuff that I learned and grew up with my dad doing, fixing cars and construction, that kind of stuff. In here, this is more of my mom's domain. My mom reads books voraciously. She goes through at least 2 books a week, is my guess. And so with that, this is where my love of reading really came from, is from my mom. My mom was a school teacher and taught elementary for like 30 years. And so because of that, I learned different things from my parents, right? That's where this is all going to. And so today, as the episode, instead of doing a thing that is kind of dad focused, we're going to talk about feminism, but we're going to talk about it in this way. We're going to talk about where it all like kind of transpires, like how the different waves work. And we're going to compare them to Project 2025 and how it's really trying to reverse gains that have been made in the last 120 years. Like, it's crazy. This is the direction that they want to go. And I think it's beneficial if you understand it better in not only the context of what they're trying to do, but what has been done in feminism. So that said, we will be talking about Project 2025, the mandate for leadership from the Heritage Foundation, and feminism here and in the book room with books, like books. Let's talk about feminism. Let's go! So I chose these 2 books to get out here and talk about for a very specific reason. The Project 2025 is 900 pages long. And that 900 pages isn't just policy proposals. It's a contextualizing of those policy proposals so that you know why they're proposing them and what worldview they have. I've read parts of it. It's really not fun to read. It's not a good read. So I focused on the feminism stuff because I think that's an easier way to approach it instead of going through all their stuff as a bulletproof. If you want to learn more about it, it's on the internet. The whole thing is free to download. They do change it occasionally, and so you'll want to get a copy and then refer to the copy you're talking about. You can also go on Reddit. There is a subreddit called Defeat Project 2025. And after this discussion, I hope that you feel that way too. We will see. But I picked these books because they're both about 900 pages. The complete works of H.P. Lovecraft drops in at 860 pages. The complete works of Edgar Allan Poe drop in at 1,020 pages. This is their life's work. All of the things Lovecraft wrote in his life, all of the things Edgar Allan Poe wrote in his life are in here. And Project 2025, to me, is scarier than either one of these. Let's talk about it. In the Mandate for Leadership, which is what it used to be called. So Heritage Foundation is a group that puts forward conservative policies and principles that they hope to turn into law. They go, this is the way that we think the government should implement this law. This is what we should. They've been doing it since Reagan, right? So they've been around, and they publish one of these for pretty much every administration. They say, if there is a super conservative candidate and they want to use this, here's our playbook. Here's our playbook. This is the biggest one they've ever done, though. I was looking through the old ones and I couldn't find larger than 900 pages, and a lot of the stuff continues to be the same. But they put it out there, and this one in particular is more transgressive to me, and that's because like more than 60% of the people that worked on this one were in Donald Trump's former staff. They're his chief of staff, the guy that run the HR department. Like, there's a whole bunch of guys from his prior administration that worked on this thing. So if there is another Trump presidency, it's quite likely that they will try to implement these. If there's not a Trump presidency, they will still try to implement these. They're going to come through at the state level. They're going to come through in the House. They're going to keep pushing these ideas. So let's talk about what they are, specifically in regards to feminism. So the thing opens up and says this. This is one of the lines from the opening brief. Look at America under the cultural and ruling elite today. Children suffer the toxic normalization of transgenderism with drag queens and pornography invading their school libraries. That's a clear thing that they've been harping on for a while. They've decided that that's one of the new boogeymen, is trans people and drag queens. Why? Why? Drag queens have been around for a long time. Hell, Shakespeare's plays, all the men were in drag. So it's this performative gender disnormative thing, right? That's a direct piece of what feminism, in some of its waves, tried to do, is abstract gender and make it less of a construct. That pull and that push starts in the late 1800s, right? And so late 1800s, you have the Seneca Falls Convention, and you have women advocating for the right to vote. 105 years ago, women could not vote. We had to pass the 19th Amendment. It got passed in 1919. It got ratified in 1920. And then women could vote. This was a huge movement. They were called suffragettes. They were trying to get the suffrage. Suffrage is the ability to vote, the ability to exercise your right to vote. And women were not allowed to vote. So in that piece, that very first wave of feminism, it was all about the vote. It was all about getting women the right to vote. At this point, it doesn't look like Project 2025 or even anybody at the Heritage Foundation is crazy enough to advocate to take away women's right to vote. So we're safe on that front, which is good. Everybody should be allowed to participate in the democracy that is controlling and governing their world. Fair. The second wave of it is editing, Justin, which you know means that whatever I just said, I was probably not quite accurate about. So this is what I found out. Nobody's actively trying to take away women's right to vote. But J.D. Vance, who is now Trump's running mate, is heavily sponsored by a guy named Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel has a giant surveillance company called Palantir. He's also super libertarian, and in a article in Cato Unbound, which is a blog affiliated with the libertarian think tank, the Cato Institute, in 2009, Peter Thiel, who is one of the people who funds J.D. Vance and who funds parts of the administration, said since 1920, the vast increase in welfare beneficiaries and the extension of the franchise to women, two constituencies that are notoriously tough for libertarians, have rendered the notion of capitalist democracy into an oxymoron. He thinks that extending the franchise to women, allowing them to vote, has hurt capitalist democracy. So he's not saying we shouldn't have given them the right to vote. He's saying that giving them the right to vote was bad for him to be able to make more money in a democracy. That's difficult and that's challenging. He never walked it back either. He responded to that and he said that it would be absurd to suggest that women's votes will be taken away or that this would solve the political problems that vex us. While I don't think that any class of people should be disenfranchised, I have little hope that voting will make things better. Let's all vote. Let's all vote. How about everybody vote? Just everybody vote so that Peter Thiel's not in charge. So this is problematic. And I wanted to say that, but I also want to say, because I recorded this the morning that Joe Biden stepped down. So as you listen to the rest of this episode, keep in mind the structure of some of these attacks, and then recognize that when Hillary Clinton ran, there was a large current of misogyny in the campaign against her. Being a woman was one of the things that held her back. And then recognize that Kamala Harris is a woman of color who has never had children of her own. She married a divorcee with 2 kids, so she's got 2 stepkids, and she's mothered to them. I am not saying in any way she's not a mother. I'm just saying that if you think about those things, you'll start to know where the attacks are going to come from if Kamala is our nominee. And I will say that if Kamala is our nominee, I'm going to support her, just like Donald Trump did in 2011 when she was running for Attorney General in California. Here's the check. So it's one thing me and Donald agree on. Kamala should be supported. Back to the program. The second wave of feminism came out, it arose kind of because two things. There are two motivating factors for this. One is the birth control pill, and the other one is working during World War II. So all of the people that come out of that, women that are in the workforce, and now there's this contraceptive pill that you can actually take and control when you get pregnant. Health is improving. You don't have to have 12 children to have 3, which was the case in the 20s and 30s. With that advent of control and with that advent of empowerment in the workplace, the second wave of feminism is about equal right to work, equal access to work, and sexual liberation and freedom, being able to control their own body and decide when, where, and how they get pregnant. So that wave is the one that I think most people think of today when they think of feminism, is beyond the suffragettes pushing through that piece. All of a sudden we arise in this world after World War II and with the advent of the birth control pill, where women can actually control what happens with their lives. And again, that's a phenomenal shift in the paradigm before World War II. Like World War I, the 1800s, even the suffragettes probably weren't thinking, hey, I'd like to not have 12 children. But now there's an opportunity to control your body, to control your cycle, and to use condoms and have sex and not get pregnant. So the first one culminated in the 19th Amendment, which allowed women the right to vote. This one, the second wave of feminism, is really running on the back of what's called the Equal Rights Amendment, which Congress actually introduced in 1923. And then it was going through the ratification process. Now, this one was more controversial because it set up standards of equality in the workplace and workplace rights for women. And so through 1977, it had only received 35 of the 38 state ratifications it needed, right? So 2/3 of states have to be on board. And at that point, it had 35. It had huge bipartisan support. Nixon, Ford, Carter were all, this is a good idea. It seemed like it was going to make it, and it seemed like that push in the late 70s really helped to get it to where it was almost over the finish line. It just needed 2 more states. The kicker, though, was somebody that would be right at home in the Heritage Foundation. That's Phyllis Schlafly. She organized this group to say, we don't want it. And they were all women going, we don't want it. This is going to take away our right to be mothers and stay home. It's going to change the way divorce works and alimony. And so she ginned up this outrage that was saying something that wasn't truly in the amendment. The amendment was going to give women more opportunities in the workplace and more equality in the workplace. And this person decided that it was a danger. And so that push from Phyllis really put the brakes on the Equal Rights Amendment. And if you look and want to follow that up some more, you can look at it just recently got ratification. The problem was it was too far out of the space that it needed to be ratified. So it kind of should be an amendment, but it's not. And now we can't get the support to pass it in the Senate and the House. So that didn't culminate in an amendment. The second wave of feminism around working and control of their bodies didn't get to where it needed to get. And there was a book that came out called The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan. This goes in direct contrast to what Phyllis Schlafly was saying. Betty Friedan went around and interviewed a bunch of housewives, a bunch of working women, and then put out this thing called The Feminine Mystique. And The Feminine Mystique is talking about this idea that we have, this kind of gendered perception in our head that women would be fulfilled from housework, marriage, and children. The prevailing belief was that women who are truly feminine shouldn't want to work or get an education. They probably want to be mothers and want to be married and want to take care of their kids and make a home. The Feminine Mystique says, no, if you talk to them, they don't, right? So I think that tension is really key to what we're looking at now with Project 2025, right? So you have this antiquated perception of how people think the world should be and how their world probably is. And on the other hand, you have what other people's worlds are and can be. And so that conflict, where you have Phyllis Schlafly and the people trying to conserve the way things are and the way they see things, are uncomfortable with this new information, with the way things are changing. And I think that's where Project 2025's biggest conflict is. Because it's a lot of Phyllis Schlaflys, right, that are uncomfortable with, it's not Betty Friedan anymore. Now it's all the people that are talking about trans rights and issues, LGBTQ, girls with short hair that wear pants, right? That's non-conforming to the way that they see the world. And that's the tension at the heart of Project 2025. So in Project 2025, it calls for the removal of language stating gender equality or gender equity from every federal piece of legislation. Just don't use those words. So it's not, we didn't pass the Equal Rights Amendment in time, but this is directly going backwards. This is directly pushing back against second wave feminism and going, gender equity and gender equality are not necessary and not a real thing according to Project 2025. It also recommends renaming the Office of Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment as the USAID Office of Women, Children, and Families, and focuses on pro-life initiatives. So this is another place where we get that construct push. A lot of the things in Project 2025 call for traditional families and traditional family roles. What they mean is a mother and father and then their kids. They don't want single parents. They don't want gay parents adopting. They don't want lesbian mothers having children. They don't want that because it's not what they feel comfortable with. And that's the tension with Project 2025. This is, second wave feminism is also when Roe v. Wade gets through, right? So 1970s, we get Roe v. Wade, and then that's gone now. So Project 2025 is actively working and pushing for these things anyway. We'll talk more about that in a second. So the Project 2025 also links federal assistance to family-oriented marriage plans, calling out the Biden administration for subsidizing single motherhood, disincentivizing work, and penalizing marriage, which is not accurate at all. The support that's provided under things like SNAP or the EBT, all of those things, heck, during the pandemic, we had the children's tax credit, which took more children out of poverty than anything we've ever done. And they don't want to do that. So when Project 2025 says they are for children, understand that they are discussing specifically Christian, formal, traditional families with children, and not single family households, not poor families. They actively worked against those things. And here's this. Future leadership must address the widely promoted woke culture that has spread throughout the federal government with identity politics and social justice advocacy, replacing such traditional American values as patriotism, colorblindness, and even workplace competence. I'm going to talk about the word woke for not long, like 2 minutes, and I'll be past it, and then we can go on with this. The word woke came out of African American culture to describe becoming aware of the injustice and imbalance in the systems that they move and act in. The disparity in policing among African American youth, the disparity of hiring based on names that sound African American. Like once you're woke, you see that that's the game that's happening. And somehow the conservative groups have latched onto that word and said all these things we're doing, and this is all woke bullshit crap. This isn't real. Woke is not real. So whenever you hear them say woke, ask them what they're talking about, because they usually can't define it or explain or give a concrete example. They just think it's trying to take away the impediments that are there that they enjoy. I heard a thing talking about privilege, and I am a tall, white, cisgendered, heterosexual man. I didn't notice that I was privileged because you don't encounter obstacles. You don't encounter blocks. The world's kind of made to fit me. except for plane seats. I am not made to fit in plane seats, but it's made to fit me in a way that you don't recognize. You just fit. Privilege, that's privilege. Privilege is not having to recognize it or think about it or have it even affect you. And I think, when I think of woke, I think of that's that point when whatever privilege or obstacles there are, you see, you go, oh crap, look at this. These things, these policies overwhelmingly affect this group and never me. I don't get pulled out of lines to be checked a second time. I walk right through the airport. I go on job interviews and there's nothing there. My name doesn't ring any bells or scare anybody. And that's what privilege is. So this whole woke privilege, the way that they talk about it is almost a smokescreen for what they're really doing and really chasing, which is trying to make everybody be like them and standardize the way privilege works and they currently enjoy. So that's second wave. Second wave is currently being dismantled, like by people affiliated with the Heritage Foundation, by people in the Republican Party. Second wave feminism is being dismantled. So let's talk about the third wave of feminism and see if we can find any hope there. So the first wave of feminism and the second wave of feminism are largely embodied by white women, right? The suffragettes were white women. Most of the people taking place in the sexual and workplace revolution were white women. This is coming out of the civil rights era, right during it and happening concurrently. And there's so much focus on getting just basic rights for African Americans that they're not really included in this. There's some on the margins, but this is a predominantly white movement. Third wave comes in the early 19th to early aughts, and it really gets kicked off by the way Anita Hill is treated in the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearing. Anita Hill credibly alleged sexual harassment by Clarence Thomas while she was working in the same office as him. And from all accounts, Clarence Thomas is a pervert who would talk about the porno he was watching out loud to his colleagues in the office. That doesn't sound like a good environment to work in. And during the hearing, Anita Hill, a black woman, courageously goes and testifies before Congress and says, hey, this is my experience of him. You can take what you want from it, but this is my experience of him. And a white male group in the Judiciary Committee goes, yeah, we don't really care. One of those was our current president, Joe Biden. So then it goes to the floor and Clarence Thomas gets nominated by a vote of 52 to 48. So if you start thinking about these Supreme Court justices and how the rights gotten them in there, specifically, so beside Thomas, you've got Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and then Gorsuch, right? So the movements to get those guys in there, they scrape through. They barely get through. So it doesn't feel representative. The biggest thing to understand about the third wave of feminism is that it's kind of complicated to define what its actual active goals were. In the first one, it's very clear. Vote. In the second one, it's very clear. Sexual and workplace equality. Okay. Third wave feminism is trying to dismantle this culture around gender norms. And that makes it very difficult to say what its concrete goal is. How do you know when you've succeeded in dismantling cultural gender norms? It became this piece where they were looking at layers of oppression and what's called intersectionality. And Anita Hill is a good example of that in study. Because Anita Hill not only has the difficulty in moving through the world being a woman, right? She also has the difficulty of moving through the world as a black person. And so when you put those on top of each other, you're looking at the intersection of being a woman and being black. Now you can get even more complicated because there are people that are women who are male appearing, like they look more mannish, plus they're gay, right? And then you have a different intersection of how those rights play. Because now you're not just trying to dismantle a part of a system. You're trying to dismantle the way that the world perceives and interacts with you by default. This takes a very long time. It requires a shifting of culture, and that is what bothers Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation so much, is that all these things that have been done are allowing people space in the world. And the more space that's allowed for them in the world, and the more awareness there is of their difficulties and their struggles, the Heritage Foundation feels like it's pushing back against its core values. And this is where we get into something that we talked about in the Satanic Temple video, and that's the difference between legality, morality, and culture. Legality is there to protect your ability to have your morality and your culture. We should be working to make the laws less intrusive and more expansive and allowing. We should make the laws in such a way that it encourages proper behavior from companies and individuals to allow people to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And Project 2025 does not want that. They want mother, father, 2.2 children working away inside the machine and going to church on Sunday. It's an explicitly religious push for legality. Those should not be combined. Carrying on. So in the third wave of feminism, a note on the wave thing. The wave structure is very difficult to hold on to after the first and second wave. Like third wave and fourth wave kind of flow and are always active. I say that Anita Hill's kind of the beginning of this, but it was there and there were people moving to it. It's just rises in prominence during Anita Hill's testimony. So the wave structure is kind of difficult at this point. It does make sense because the waves rise and fall, but there's little ripples and little pushes, and there's waves happening in different parts of the ocean. This is all very happening in America stuff, right? So at the same time this is happening in America, you have a successful push in Iran, and you have the Shah, and you have the religious takeover of Iran as a country. And that changes it in the way that Project 2025 wants. So in this third wave, one of the things that pops up is that there's these edge cases, these edge people that are starting to get in there and have their own movements. You also have gender non-normative bands in Seattle, riot girl bands pop up that really push back against the classic definition of what music girls are allowed to play and what they're supposed to do when they're on stage, right? So to this point, you've got a lot of singers. Even Cher is probably the most out there example, but she's still just singing, and they're nice, comfortable pop songs. The Riot Girls directly address issues such as domestic abuse, sexuality, racism, patriarchy, classism, anarchism, and female empowerment. They're rad. Go listen to them. They're Bikini Kill, Bratmobile, Heavens to Betsy, Slant Six, Huggy Bear, Jack Off Jill, and Skin Teen. They put this stuff in their music in a way that girls hadn't really been not allowed to, but been doing or been popular. Like it just wasn't done. And if it was done, you don't have any recording company that's going to touch it, right? It's not going to get radio play. But now in Seattle, you've got this kind of breakout, independent, empowered women group that come in and kind of smash things. And so that's what the third wave is really doing. It's kind of starting to go, oh, feminism is about more than this. Feminism is about all these different ways to let people have space. People that we haven't been giving space to. People that we haven't allowed to express themselves in the broader culture. And that, again, is where the Heritage Foundation gets scared. They want everything to be the same. They want everything to be their way, and they want to put in legislation to keep it that way. For example, Project 2025 asked legislators to pass a law that requires employers who provide benefits for abortion care to provide equal or greater benefits to support pregnancy, childbirth, parenthood, and adoption. So I'm not against supporting those things. It's that privileging that over any other choice. That's the pivot. That's the Project 2025 danger, is that they do have this pivot. It also calls for employers to provide pro-life workplace accommodations for mothers. This is one that's interesting because I actually really like this idea, just like I like the last one. We should give people benefits for all kinds of things. We should support all kinds of different stuff, but we should support it equally. We should be, here's resources, make your choices. There's resources for whatever you choose. Project 2025, in one of the very, very, very few things I agree with, wants to incentivize on-site childcare and passing a law saying that if an employer provides on-site childcare as a benefit, it is not subtracted from an employee's hourly pay or salary. Hey, I agree. We should make it easier and more affordable for women to be in the workplace. I know people that are single mothers, and I cannot imagine the difficulty and the struggles in my own life that they go through trying to provide childcare while working 2 jobs and probably doing a side hustle. It's super hard. So that'd be great. I mean, if think about how it would change your world if you had that benefit. Okay, so then my question is, let's get a bill on it right now. If you're so in for this, I'll bet you if the Republicans put forward a bill that was like that right now, Democrats would go for it. They say this stuff all the time, and this is one of the reasons it's a 900-page gosh dang book. It's because they surround all these policy proposals. Like, that's a good policy proposal. We should have on-site childcare at any employer that's past a certain size. We should subsidize childcare so that women can enter the workforce. But then it says families comprised of a married mother, father, and their children are the foundation of a well-ordered nation and healthy society. The male-female dyad is essential to human nature, and every child has a right to a mother and father. That is a complicated, gosh dang statement that I do not fully agree with. That the male-female dyad is essential to human nature is one of these things that continually pops up from the Heritage Foundation and organizations like them. It's this push that says classic man-womanness is important. I understand their point, but I do not agree with it because there's a spectrum of being that we have to allow people space to be. And in this case, when you're talking about a male-female dyad, gender is complicated. Sex is complicated. Biological sex is complicated. And it's so complicated and so much of a spectrum, and it is in all animals that have genders and biological sex, that it expresses so many different ways. And to say we have to do it this way is so close-minded. It's so close-minded. The way Project 2025 is advocating the notion of a family is where gender roles are very traditional. They say they support family values, but it's really the patriarchal family. So if you've ever seen that illustration that has the umbrellas and it's like mom takes care of the kids, dad takes care of mom, God takes care of everybody, that's their worldview. Take care of each other. Take turns carrying the load. There's not always 2 sets of footprints. You know, there's somewhere somebody's carrying you. So the third wave of feminism is this intersectionality, this new change, and this new adoption of other pieces, right? It's really starting to disentangle gender expression and allowing for greater gender expression. That is probably the thing that is most antithetical to what Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation want, is that disentangling. They want rigid gender roles. They want stereotypes. They want things to be a way so that they're comfortable. And they don't have to be intruded on by TV shows with lesbian parents in them. They really don't want that. They really don't. The fourth wave of feminism, it's kind of what's happening now, like in the last 15 years, and it's still happening. And it's still pulling on those threads. It's trying to disentangle of them. And the way it comes out of third wave is by kind of switching the gears, and instead of being in a discovery phase, which what third wave kind of was, is discovering that there are all these edges that are not being represented in feminism, it's now embracing all those edges and kind of trying to push against them while disassembling those gender norms. So this one, I mean, this one's crazy. And it's crazy to me because it's, I think fourth wave feminism can almost be pulled into all of the struggles. The LGBTQ community, the trans community. Right now, the attack on drag queens, the attack on pornography in libraries because a book mentions genitals. The things that fourth wave feminism is pushing back on are things that we're all kind of pushing back on and trying to disentangle in more liberal communities. There's ways that you can look at it as housing is a part of this. There's ways that you can look at it that education is part of this, the workplace. Like it's all these different places where traditional ways of viewing individuals are the only way. And I think why it's having such a moment right now is because in the last 10 years, really since we started carrying around computers in our pockets, we've had so much access to so many things all the time. And we've been able to share all these experiences we're having with each other all of the time, that all of a sudden, the margins became the mainstream. Stuff that was never popular became popular because it was exposed to a broader audience. It turns out that a lot of these ideas and a lot of these feelings are extraordinarily popular. People like nerdy stuff. People like Marvel and comic books now. People play trading card games and video games. I only comparing that to feminism because the ideas are doing the same thing. Look at how accepting the younger generations are of LGBTQ. Look at how aware they are of somebody being gendered differently and expressing themselves differently. That's the same thing that happened with Marvel, is that all these things that people never been exposed to, they got exposed to and went, okay, doesn't bother me. No skin off my back. Heritage Foundation and Project 2025 went, oh my gosh, I'm mortally wounded. They're a bunch of snowflakes in that sense. They really can't handle being exposed to things that are different. And it's so funny when they criticize the other side and go, oh, you can't handle truth. You can't handle that there's only a boy and a girl. That's not the truth. And if you want somebody that can't handle it, a little snowflakey, it's these guys over here. So some of the things in fourth wave feminism that really hit are like the MeToo movement, where people are getting better at calling out sexual assault, sexual harassment, and rape. There are the body positivity movement and kind of going, you can be comfortable in your skin. That body positivity one has a strange tension because at the same time that the body positivity message is getting out, and people go, oh, I like that message. I want to be comfortable with me. At the same time, you have the flood of Instagram, TikTok, Vine, Facebook stuff with super thin, AI-influenced people and bodies. So that's a strange tension, and it's something that we should discuss, and we should do things like this to talk about it. We shouldn't mandate what a boy is and what a girl is. So there's not a huge amount of things in this that become bills or law. They're kind of just pushing on the existing laws to get a better body of court cases out that kind of support it. Something that Project 2025 is doing in this space is directly attacking pornography. Now, I know what everybody thinks of when I say pornography. We'll refer to Playboy and Penthouse as the two, like, those were the most mainstream pornographic outlets of my childhood, right? That's where that was. And then there were like all kinds of movies and stuff. You can go watch Boogie Nights to get a sense of that time. But that's that pornography. And there was famously Larry Flynt went all the way up to the Supreme Court and argued about pornography being a free expression, his free speech rights. And he was right, and that Supreme Court case went through. So, and I'm not going to sit here and argue about the drawbacks or the benefits or whatever pornography. I don't care. That's not what this one's about. The reason I'm bringing up pornography is because in Project 2025, they don't define it. And there's a very, very good reason they don't define it. They start lumping all kinds of things that aren't pornography adjacent to pornography. And they're doing that specifically so they can sneak it in. They're going to say, we're outlawing pornography. While at the same time going, you know what's pornography? Drag queens. You know, it's pornography. Any book that describes a sexual encounter. Pornography, right? So it's this cheater way to get around having to define their other stuff. All of a sudden, trans discussion is pornography. And the scary part about this is that this part of Project 2025 is already being enacted. Florida has a law about its public institutions talking about LGBTQ, like mentioning them. You have places where pornography online, you have to show proof of age. And so you have porn sites are just going, well, we're not in Alabama anymore. We're not in Texas anymore. There are places where they're trying to get stuff like Grindr, which is a gay dating app, made pornographic. And that's that path, right? Because it's not just pornography. It's trans, it's LGBTQ, it's people that need gender affirming care. And Project 2025 is directly attacking that. From the New Republic, the attack on porn is inseparable from the attacks on abortion and contraception, on marriage equality and trans rights, and of course on drag queens and library books, all of which they believe threaten the straight married family as the natural bedrock of society. All of these threats to them constitute pornography. By calling on the president to outlaw porn, they're calling for the eradication of all these imagined enemies of the family. That's the ticket, right? Is Project 2025 is about mandating the thing they feel safe with. They don't want these other things. I mean, if they want us to put trigger warnings on everything, we can, but I don't think they like those. So, a few more quotes in here. Here's what I was saying earlier. The New Republic also says Project 2025 is already here, depending on where you live. In Alabama, one of 8 states that forces schools to out trans students. In Florida, one of more than a dozen states that bars or highly restricts discussions of LGBTQ people or issues in the classroom. Or in Texas, one of the 24 states that bans hormones or puberty blocker for trans and gender non-conforming youth. These kids already live under the conservative vision of protecting children. Project 2025 is proof that they want to finish the job to make everyone in the United States live subject to their rules. I'm gonna hit on one last note because I know I've gone a little long. I have all this. Like I started writing other stuff comparing this to political correctness and that it got too long. There's too much stuff. 900 pages of too much stuff. In Project 2025, they say that no public education employee or contractor shall use a name to address a student other than the name listed on the student's birth certificate without the written permission of a student's parents or guardians. No public education employee or contractor shall use a pronoun in addressing a student that is different from that student's biological sex without the written permission of a student's parents or guardians. And no public institution may require an education employee or contractor to use a pronoun that does not match a person's biological sex if contrary to the employee's or contractor's religious or moral convictions. I'm going to call out one point of hypocrisy in all this crap, all this junk that's in Project 2025. That's J.D. Vance, our boy who wrote Hillbilly Elegy and is now the vice presidential nominee for the Republican Party. J.D. Vance is not his birth name. He was born James Donald Bowman. His parents got divorced, and he changed his middle name from Donald to David. For a while in high school, he used his stepfather's last name, and he was James David Hamill. When he married his wife, he decided to change his last name again to honor his grandparents who were a big part of his life, and now goes by James David Vance. This guy has had 4 names and doesn't want us to call a kid by whatever name they want. What a crappy thing to do. What a weird space to put yourself in. To say we can't call Ellen Page Elliot Page? I don't care, it doesn't hurt me. To say we can't refer to somebody that's as they or he or her or whatever they want, I don't care. All that stuff doesn't affect me because it's not a part of my worldview. Project 2025, J.D. Vance, all these guys, it's part of their worldview And part of that difference, this is that thing I was talking about earlier about privilege. He is privileged. He was allowed to change his name however, whenever he wanted. And nobody cared. Let other people have that benefit. Let yourself not care about it. This doesn't affect you. It's frustrating. I don't know if I can do another one on Project 2025. It just gets me really agitated. While I was writing this week, I had like stress. I slept poorly. All of these things I've talked about, all this stuff, especially like the hypocrisy that's latent in the whole flippin' thing, is just to make you aware that Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation is going to continue to try and push these ideas. We have to strengthen our institutions and we have to strengthen our laws to push back against them. And while I believe that there are good people and good ideas on the Republican side of the fence, I absolutely do think there are some things that they've got that are good ideas. I think their current intransigence and unwillingness to work with Democrats on anything means that they're fighting for power on the margins. They're fighting for power any way they can. And if you vote red, Heritage Foundation stuff is going to come in. If that's what you want, I'm happy to have a conversation with you in the comments. I'm happy to have a conversation with you and try and figure that out. But I highly recommend looking at Democratic candidates, going and pulling out your beliefs and your views and going, okay, I may believe that the only real family is a male, a female, and their kids. Do I believe that I have the right and our country should have the right to tell people that? And if that's the case, what happens when somebody comes into power that is against that? I believe it should be strengthened. Our institutions and our laws should be strengthened so that it can protect you from that as well. I don't want somebody to come in and say, yep, no male, female parents, only gay marriages from now on, right? I don't want that to happen. I want you to be able to do you, but I want me to be able to do me. So with that, if you have any questions about any of these books, happy to talk about them. Except the Twilight stuff, that's not mine. Those are not my books. I have not read them. Bye.